after Fukushima, everybody hates uranium. That's when I got involved in NextGen, which is the world's biggest and richest undeveloped uranium deposit. It'll be a monster producer when it gets commissioned. But I'll tell you, when I got involved in that, like, again, the abuse I took was insane. Everybody, don't you know nuclear power is bad, and uranium, well, there's lots of uranium out there. And I was, I kind of positive on uranium, but one thing I did know is, I said, NextGen, I looked at all the drill holes. I said, NextGen has at least 200 million pounds of uranium based on my work. And all the other analysts on Bay Street are like 30 million pounds, 35 million. I remember talking to one of the guys. He's still in business today, so, I don't want to make too much fun of him. I say to him, I said, listen, do you not do any math?
Hi, all. This is Andy here. I'm talking with Warren Irwin of Rosseau Asset Management. How you doing, Warren?
I'm doing great, Andy.
Thanks for coming on. It really is an honor of mine. I was telling you offline, you're on the Mount Rushmore, or my Mount Rushmore of speculators or investors or whatever you want to call it. And as I mentioned to you just previously, I was an early investor of Bre-X, and that was complete fluke that I bought that. I was a young college kid, bought it on a whim, if you would, put a couple $1,000s in it, forgot about it. My broker called me back in the day when I used a broker. He said, Andy, this thing is $20. And I was like, sell. And I'm so glad that I did. And then I remember literally a week later is like over $50. And I was like thinking, what did I do? And then I was so mad at myself. I paid for my first year of college with that. And then it crashed, and I was super happy. I had the gauntlet of emotions, if you would. And what really got me interested in you is you were an early investor, maybe not as early as I was, but you held on to that thing, and then you were one of the people that discovered it, discovered the fraud. Just give me the 10,000-foot view on that. What was going on in your mind through all that, and yeah, your range of emotions, but you're not supposed to be emotional, but we are. And then what made you suspicious of this whole thing?
Well, a good summary of it was I wrote after the movie Gold came out. I said, it's kind of a fun movie, but it's got everything wrong. So why don't I just write a 4-page article summarizing my experiences with it? So anybody who wants to do that, I wrote it for CEO.ca. If you Google Warren Irwin, and then Bre-X, BRE-X, and then CEO.ca, the number it'll pop up. And I make such outlandish statements like Mike de Guzman's still alive, and I explain why and all that sort of stuff. So, but as far as the process of me going through Bre-X, I think it's probably one of the reasons I'm still in the business here today. And a lot of people have blown up over the years because it's a tough business. And the teachings I've learned from that, and I try and share it with as many people as I can, just the rampant greed. And that's probably the biggest lesson I learned. I was there sitting at the Chicken Deli in Toronto, pleading with a friend of mine who just made $80 million to take 10 million off the table. And, of course he didn't.
Right.
And he borrowed 10 million margin against us. So when the whole thing blew up, he was in really bad shape, right? So the rampant greed was really, really probably the biggest thing I've learned about. And it's really helped me with things. Whenever I feel that greed coming on or anything of that, I recognize it, and I just try and step back, try and look logically. And that's probably the biggest lesson I took away from it. Also that, a lot of dishonesty in mining, but there's a lot of dishonesty, frankly, in so many businesses anymore, and so many governments, and so many, the politicians, everybody's massively dishonest. But that was kind of fascinating for me, in that I learned the level of dishonesty that could be perpetuated. And so those are the things that I probably picked up the most, just the hype and the greed. Back in the mid-90s when Bre-X was running, and like every junior gold company with a management team, a property, and a listing had 100 million market cap.
That's insane.
Everyone in that hype, in the amount of billions and billions being created, and the fear of missing out. So probably where that's helped me the most is just realizing, just seeing bubbles when they happen, where people start being nonsensical and irrational. You know that bubble is not long for existence. You know, that's probably the biggest takeaway for me.
That's such great advice, and something I don't always adhere to. One of the best books that I've read was Jesse Livermore's Madness of Crowds.
Yeah,
And
it's right up there. I've got extraordinary popular delusions, madness of crowds. I've got all those books. They're a staple in my library, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I need to remind myself that almost every day, because I'm a big picture kind of a guy, I think, which most people are. But that's really not how you make your money, I don't feel, in this business. But also, you get sucked in a lot easier and in believing whatever the story is, if you would. And it could be the right story even, but you just caught it too late. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, that leads me to today, and I want to go back there somewhat to what we just talked about, and because it seems like there's some things that are bubbly now. But what's your, going into the new year, what's your macro view, if you would? We got two wars going on. Hopefully one's coming, hopefully both of them are coming to an end, but the Ukraine war seems like it's closer to an end than the other one. But what's your macro? How does that wars and money printing or interest rates now, deflation, it seems like, how does all that affect your decisions, and how do you see the world right now?
Yeah. One thing that shaped my view on macro is when my first job was, I was a fixed income analyst for and I was one of the top ranked ones in Canada when I started out. I was a young punk kid, right? So
you're a bond trader.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a trader. I was a fixed income analyst. So I developed the benchmark for the Canadian market, the Universe Bond Index. I developed that back in '87. Did all the mathematics behind it. So, but while I was there, we were initially, before we started our own fixed income research department. This is back in McLeod Young Weir, later acquired by Scotia. We were in the economics department. So here I am, a math undergrad in the economics department. So I got to go to tons and tons of economic presentations and listening to these macro guys. And I never, ever found them to ever be right. Like they were like, there was not one that I could even listen to. And I listened to all the fine ones. And I worked indirectly for our chief economist, who was a very, very smart guy. But frankly, there's so many moving parts in a macro call that you just cannot predict. So I learned that early in my career, and I've yet to be proven wrong. Occasionally a guy will get a macro call right or wrong. I'll give you an example of why I don't put a ton of weight in this. And hey, I'll give you my macro call anyways. But my favorite one is oil, right? When oil hit, what, $150? Did anybody predict oil? No. Oil is the monster commodity of the entire world. There's more people analyzing it than any other commodity in the entire world, and nobody called it. Did anybody call minus $40 oil? Who called that one? Did you know anybody even called minus $1 oil? Nobody. No. So all these talking heads who talk macro, okay, they're constantly wrong. And the reason they're wrong is because there are so many factors that factor into all these situations, and no human can correctly predict them all. And there's so many moving parts that are so random that it's very, very difficult to do that. And then that went on when I was a fixed income analyst. Of course, predicting interest rates is a very important thing for the bond market. And I, again, found nobody who could consistently predict interest rates. And so that being said, what do you want to know about my macro view of the world?
Well,
But
what are you looking at in 2024? We got two wars going on, and you do play in the sandbox of junior miners, but natural resources. Yeah, what's influencing you now, and what do you see?
well, what I'm doing is what I try and do again along those themes. I'm ignoring the macro. How many people called for a recession this year in terrible times? What, the Dow just hit all-time high or
Right.
new highs, right? So people have really no idea what the future holds for us. So what am I doing on the resource? I'm in a highly cyclical business. So Warren, you must have a view. The mining business is super cyclical. You must have a view on every single commodity. Well, the one macro view I have is this whole ESG movement is complete garbage, complete rubbish. I think the EV craze is complete baloney. It's going to happen in time, but it's just way, way overhyped. Like, take a look at do some work on Ford and GM right now and how they're shutting down their EV plans because nobody's buying EVs. Ford Lightnings which is the Lightning is the electric version of the Ford F-150 sitting on dealers' lots across North America, right? So this EV craze is not happening, and it's kind of good maybe that it isn't happening because guess what? Nobody is building electrical infrastructure to support the EV market. So we're going to be, what do you want to make the whole world like California, where you have to decide between charging your car or turning on your air conditioner?
Right.
That's third world country stuff coming to a developed country. Can you imagine living in California? And it was the last summer, the summer before, they were asking people, don't charge your electric vehicle because
Right.
we don't have enough power. And guess what? Have you heard, when's the last time you heard California saying, well, due to our planned adoption and the rules where we're outlawing ICE vehicles, we're building 3 new nuclear power plants to provide that. And we're upgrading our electrical system throughout the state to provide for this. You're not hearing that.
Right.
My condo corp just told me, Warren, only 20% of the people in my condo are going to be able to charge their electric vehicles because we can't get enough power from Toronto Hydro, right? So, and then you must hear the stories, right, about all the big trucking companies are trying to set up a distribution center outside of a town, and they go to the town and say, this much power we need to charge all our trucks. The town goes, well, that's how much the entire town uses.
Right.
You've heard that, and the things people don't even realize too, right? Do you know how heavy those trucks are? They're monstrously heavy. You know what they're going to do to our poor roads that were designed for vehicles the way they are today? Like even a let's say a Hummer EV, they weigh 50% more than a typical internal combustion engine truck. 50% more. They're running on the exact same rubber. So you have a 50% more pounds per square inch on all our highways around the world. Boy, and you know how rough shape, like I know where I live, the highways are in terrible shape. Can you imagine you increase the average weight of every vehicle by 50%? See what the roads are going to look like in 10 years, right? There's so many ridiculous things.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that whole thesis of the EV revolution is supposed to drive metals demand. And we're supposed to decide what metals to invest in. So I have to go out, I have to stake a property, I have to do some drilling, I have to prove up a resource, I have to get an environmental permit, I have to design a mine plan, build the mine, it'll take 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years to get the payback. And then, in like 15 years time, I'm ready to actually make some return on my investment. And what do you know? Oh, we don't need that metal for batteries anymore. There's a new technology.
Or we're back with gasoline. So
the world we're living in right now is completely wacky. And to have politicians making the decisions they're making is going to make it wackier. So do I have any strong views on anything? It's pretty tough to have strong views on anything. So my view is this. I will look at, like you said, I will look at things that I know, which is, I know that if you go out to a certain property and you drill a hole and you pull out, 100 meters of massive sulfides, and you have a good sense of the geological setting, which is much easier to predict, you get a sense that you're going to build a ton of resources, whether it be of nickel, copper, whatever metal you're going after. Those are the things I could have within my brain, within my capabilities. I have a reasonable handle on being able to predict what the price of nickel and copper is when we do actually make the discovery or put it into production or sell it to a major. That's beyond my ability to predict. And, I know you've seen it here recently, a perfect example. Everybody's so bullish on copper, right? Copper's been tagged, right? So
in the tank, yeah.
Yeah. And people are super bullish there on nickel for a while. Now,
It's in the
nickel's not
tank.
doing super great. It's tanking.
It's tank.
And, then more recently you've seen, well, everybody's jumping on the lithium bandwagon. They ramp lithium up. Now people figured out, well, people aren't adopting EVs quite as quickly in North America anyways as they thought they would. And, we're finding lithium pretty much everywhere in the world. We're finding it in the brines of oil wells, in the excess water produced from the oil fields. And as soon as they figure out, if they haven't already, to yank the lithium out of that, we won't need all these mines and all this capacity. So, and the battery technologies are changing. As you're aware, Toyota just announced a solid state battery, right? And so the battery chemistry there is a little bit different. It takes a little bit more lithium, but the chemistry is different. Mm-hmm. But there's so many things happening. I'm just sort of the opinion. I'll look at what I can mm-hmm. predict, which is geological structure, drill holes, tonnage, grade, economics, infrastructure, things like that. And knowing that in time, people will need the copper, people will need the nickel, people will need whatever other commodity I'm after. They'll need it in time. And sometimes you'll have the trend with you, sometimes you won't, but you just do your very best.
Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like, which I think is a good place to be, is your micro is your macro almost.
Yeah.
And that's working really well for you. Something I'm curious of, though, I think, and how do I relate this, I guess, to energy? Because with what you just said, I was telling a friend, a fellow investor, hey, this was back in the spring, and I just found it when things are in the tank, that's when I become more bullish, if you would. Meaning like there has to be more reasons to that, but there has to be a lot of pain, meaning on the commodity. And I was becoming really bullish on oil just because there was just a tremendous amount of pain. And then you need to sell the rip, though, when it bounces or when it rips up. It's funny because I told him at the time, I'm somewhat mildly bullish on uranium. And then I see just recently, and I'm not talking about specific companies, I'm talking about the price of uranium. I mean, it's really high right now. It really makes me scared to be an investor in uranium or uranium companies. And then I look at the companies and they're all pretty expensive right now. So yeah, comment about that specifically. It's like, do you think there's more to go in this train of uranium or even just energy in general? Or where are you at with that?
Yeah, I'm very supportive of the nuclear industry, and hence I'm positive on uranium, the outlook going forward. And recently here over the weekend, the COP28 also made some prognostications about their desire to increase the nuclear fleet over time. Whether they meet their targets or not, that's I doubt. Safe to say, I don't think they will. But when I got involved I've been involved in a few uranium cycles. I was involved in the last one. I owned, let's say, extractor uranium, and we sold the Husab deposit to the Chinese. I was involved in the early days of GoviEx and Global Atomic. And then about 2016, when, after Fukushima, everybody hates uranium. That's when I got involved in NextGen, which is the world's biggest and richest undeveloped uranium deposit. It'll be a monster producer when it gets commissioned. But I'll tell you, when I got involved in that, like, again, the abuse I took was insane. Everybody, don't you know nuclear power is bad and uranium. Well, there's lots of uranium out there. And I was, well, I kind of positive on uranium, but one thing I did know is I said, NextGen, I looked at all the drill holes. I said, NextGen has at least 200 million pounds of uranium based on my work. And all the other analysts on Bay Street are like 30 million pounds, 35 million. I remember talking to one of the guys. He's still in business today. So, I don't want to make too much fun of him. I say to him, I said, listen, do you not do any math? Like one drill hole into the richest section of the deposit, you took a little bit of a halo around it, 35 million pounds, and you've got 35 million pounds on the entire deposit, and there's hundreds of drill holes in it. Like, do you want me to go over with my model and my cross sections and go through this line by line with you? And I said, I'm happy to do it. I'll go through with my spreadsheet. You'll see all my assumptions, but you'll see where we have 200 million pounds, not 30 million pounds. So I was very unpopular, and people thought I was crazy, but I managed to establish a very large position in NextGen. I was the largest shareholder. And over the next number of years, I just watched the wall of worry, NextGen just keep, chugging away in a face where everybody was anti-nuke and, very negative on uranium. And then more recently, I watched, people get, all of a sudden excited about uranium and go, well, where were you guys when nobody cared? Because that was the time, you're exactly right. That was the time to care about uranium. Now we've got uranium. It would hit a low, I think, around last number of years, probably hit a low around $17, I think, around in the 2016-17 timeframe.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And here we are at 80. So we've gone up 4 times. Okay,
Right.
so is now the time to be super bullish on something that's gone up 4 times off the bottom? Well, we'll see. The my outlook for uranium is pretty much this, though. Like, people, well, the demand for uranium from nuclear reactors is going to really grow. And I say, yeah, okay, sure it is. When's the last time you heard of a nuclear power plant being built in North America?
1980.
Well, there's one in some place, and there's another one there. I said, okay, well, those are the ones being built. Why don't you subtract the ones being decommissioned, because they were built back in the 70s?
Yeah.
So that's the battle you have, at least in North America, right? Is you have commissioning, non-commissioning, right? So the only place they're really building nuclear reactors to any degree is in China, right? So if they've got, it's tough to know the exact numbers, but my rough and dirty number is you've got 50 nuclear plants under construction. Let's say they get built in the next 5 years. So roughly 10 a year. You go 10 over a base of 440 is not a really big growth rate, right?
Right.
And that doesn't include, that's just the builds. That doesn't include the decommissions, right?
Right.
And people say, well, look at all the extensions, life extensions you're getting on some of these reactors. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But that doesn't add demand by extending the life of a reactor. It stops demand deterioration. So on the demand side right now, there's no scenario where you're going to get monstrous demand growth in uranium, right?
Okay.
So where people are pitching it is they're basically saying, well, you've got, let's say, 100 and check with the World Nuclear Association. Don't check with my numbers. But let's say there's 160 million pounds of uranium used every year, and there's 130 million mined. So there's, let's say, a 30 plus million pound deficit being made up, right? Somewhere. And this tormented me all the time I owned NextGen, and I'm out of NextGen now. I just moved out fairly recently to my last bit of stock. But there always seemed to be uranium showing up to meet this deficit. So the super bulls today are saying there's no more uranium coming to meet this deficit. We've got a 30 million or whatever they dream up deficit. That's why uranium's got to run. And then they stake, well, and take a look at Sprott and Sprott Uranium Trust and Yellowcake. And I haven't been following them super closely recently, but my recollection is Sprott has taken 60 million pounds out of the spot market, which is a very illiquid market. So to yank 60 million pounds out is pretty significant. And then Yellowcake, I think, is still around 20 million pounds. So I'm thinking to myself, oh yeah, you guys are so bullish on uranium. You have to count on 80 million pounds being yanked out of the market by these financial speculation vehicles to further tighten up the market. Well, I'm going, well, I wonder where the market would be today if those two vehicles didn't exist. And that,
Right.
that 80 million pounds, like, I don't know where we'd be. Would it be at $40 a pound? Don't know.
Right.
But
Right.
certainly here, now that they've ramped up the price through, somewhat, there is some market manipulation, obviously, right? They're going in there buying into the spot market, which represents a very small portion of the overall uranium market. So they're in there buying spot, manipulating the price higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here we are today at $80. Well, guess what? Pretty much every single project I know in the world is economic at $80. So
Right.
just a matter of time before one or more will come to market. Well, guess what? Well, people are hoping that there's just going to be this short window where before the 30 million pounds next gen comes in, there's going to be a real shortage. And guess what? There's no more, and we're convinced there's no more uranium stockpiles kicking around the world that are going to make up this deficit, because it's really all about this deficit. And it's not about demand growth. It's not about any of that stuff. And people are saying, well, look how long it takes to make a uranium mine. I said, well, I'd take the bet I could build a uranium mine quicker than you could build a nuclear reactor.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
these are pretty long timeline items. So my view on uranium is kind of like, it's pretty cool commodity. I think people are starting to figure out over the next few decades anyways, that nuclear power is the key to our future. Like, people are tired of getting their birds chopped up in their backyard with their stupid windmill, or having,
Rolling blackouts or something.
rolling blackouts. Or saying, sorry guys, we're living in northern England here. The wind's been kind of low. I hope you got a wood stove in your house, because there's going to be no power. And then the stupid, like in Germany, of all the stupid places to be building solar power, and the Germans are probably the poster child of the world's stupidity with respect to energy, which is, let's shut down our nuclear power plants and let's rely on wind and solar as Germans. And
right.
And Russian natural gas. Okay, what's your carbon footprint look like these days, boys? Like, they're just, these politicians are, the problem is, if I base my investing thesis on logic, but realize that we've got politicians out there. Like, when I got involved in met coal, probably 6-7 years ago, I said, well, met coal, there's one investment I have. There's a lot of met coal, and the world needs met coal to make steel. So, but all of a sudden, then everybody thought, well, coal is bad. Well, I go, well, does anybody know there's two types of coal? There's thermal coal and there's met coal. Thermal coal is the stuff you burn that should have been replaced like back in the 70s by nuclear power, except for you had Greenpeace anti-nuke since the 70s. They're still anti-nuke today. They've been fighting against nuclear power for half a century. Possibly, there's rumors that they've been financed by the thermal coal business to be anti-nuke. So we've been burning thermal coal, creating greenhouse gases and causing asthma in all the children all around North America, and putting all these heavy metals into the air, just thanks to Greenpeace, because they're anti-nukes, right? And now people are figuring out, well, maybe nuclear is not that bad of an idea. Like duh, okay. But then they lump in met coal. Well, guys, okay, if you stop mining met coal, guess what happens, right? You can't make steel. What do you need to make a nuclear power plant? How
Steel. Yeah.
steel do you need? And well, where are you going to get the steel if you're banning the mine of met coal? Then you can't make the steel, so you can't make the nuclear power plants. And then these stop oil protesters are the funniest ones. They're showing up, they're driving their cars to the protest, wearing their rubber Nike shoes, wearing their nylon jackets, all made from oil.
Yeah.
And my favorite one in Canada here is we banned plastic straws.
But there's a bunch of plastic bags wrapped in, right?
Well, don't go shopping, because everything in the store is wrapped in plastic.
Yeah,
but you can't take anything wrapped in plastic home in a plastic bag, because that's bad for the environment. So you have to cut down trees to make paper bags, which I used to be in the grocery business when I was in high school. And it was awesome when plastic bags came out. We go, great, we don't have to cut down the forest anymore to make these paper bags.
Yeah.
And they hardly use any petrochemicals to make these light bags. They're light. If something leaked in them, they wouldn't leak through. They wouldn't break as often as the paper bags would. But here we are going back in time
The paper straws.
to save the world, which we're not really saving. But my favorite, of course, the most absurd thing is the plastic straw thing, right? Like, yeah.
Well, I always thought there's not irony there, but it's like, because we have we have paper straws here, but they're wrapped in plastic. Meaning they come in a container that has a plastic wrap at the grocery store. So I didn't understand that.
Yeah, right. Well, don't get me started on that. So, it's funny because I was asking these environmental idiots. I was going, so can you just humor me here? Can you explain how my plastic straw from Canada gets into the nose of a turtle in the Caribbean or in Southeast Asia? Can you explain that, how that works? Like, because the big photo was there was a turtle with a plastic straw in its nose, and that was posted around the world as the reason we want to ban plastic straws. And I'm going, you go to Southeast Asia or you go to the Middle East, right? You know what they do, right? Like everything.
Yeah, just dumping it in the ocean.
Yeah, throw in the open sewers. I remember when I was in Thailand, this is a few decades ago, so it may not be the case. I hope it's not the case anymore. But I remember I was on a train going to Koh Samui from Bangkok, and I was in the VIP area of the train, and I was sitting there with a really fascinating business person talking, and we had our dinner on plastic paper, plastic plates and plastic cutlery and plastic cups, and the waiter comes by when we're all done, and grabbed my paper plates and just threw them out, grabbed all my plastic plates, threw them out the window. And I'm going, what is going on here? And I stick my head out the train window. As far as you can see, there was this there's this pile about 3 feet high of plastic cutlery and plates and everything all along the side of the train tracks on both sides.
That's hilarious.
And I'm going, well, that's an interesting thing to do. I hope they don't do it anymore. But then you go to Cairo and you look at the open sewers there and what's floating into the ocean there or into any of the open sewers in whether it be Jakarta or anywhere in Southeast Asia, everything's going into the sea. And
and somehow it's our fault in North America.
Yeah, well, we got to stop using plastic straws, and paper straws will save the world and whatever. So yeah.
Well, about all of that, I guess we talked a little bit about your micros, your macro, if you would. Really goes down to then how do you evaluate, what's your process in evaluating a country to invest in? Because I'm assuming you're all over the world with the different projects. Yeah. What would make a country know, let's say, for example, maybe India is a yes, but I don't know, France is a no, or vice versa. What would be the criteria in that? And then even let's go smaller. What's your methodology for evaluating a company?
Yeah, okay. On sovereign risk is an important one, and it comes down to, there's a very interesting observation I'll share with you that I've learned, because I invest a little bit in oil and in mining, right? So I do both. You'll find that oil companies will take much more political risk than mining companies will. And that's why, and the reason for that is you punch a hole in the ground, you get the oil, you get it on pipe, you get your capital back like right away. Mm-hmm. In most countries, when you do the mining, you're spending years to explore, years to drill out, years to do environmental study, years to build. So you're looking at very, very long time frames. So you need a little bit more political stability. And when people go into areas that aren't stable, they can indeed pay quite a high price through whether it be nationalization or prohibitive taxation increases, right? And well, you're seeing right now what's going on with Cobre Panama. Like they just shut down operations so that all the billions of dollars, what's going to happen there? You don't know. Why are they shutting it down? You don't know. Is it for the environment? Well, you already built everything, so probably not for the environment. And given that copper is used in the energy transition, maybe, you just never know. South America can be a tricky one. So taking a look globally, South America can be very tricky. They seem to trade, they're inherently socialist, and they occasionally go free enterprise for a while. And if you get suckered into that, you can get hurt. I've watched, let's say, Ecuador has been bouncing around quite a number of times. I remember my first investment was with Aurelian, and prior to that, I think they had 5 presidents in 5 years. So things bounce around, and you're seeing it right now. The move to the left in both Peru and Chile, and then in Argentina, you're having a sharp move to the right. So you have to be prepared for a level of volatility. Interesting though, sometimes, let's say in Argentina, you want to, mining is more controlled by the state level. So it's more of a state by state. So you're going into an area that is controlled by the state, and they have a good mining culture, and they're positive about mining. You could operate there. And then you go to other countries where it's federally regulated and you get a socialist government, that could really mess things up. So South America is a very tricky place to invest, but I do invest there. You take a look at Africa. Africa is not one place. It's all broken up into different countries. I've been invested in some crazy places there, everywhere from Ethiopia and the Congo, South Africa, to more plain vanilla ones like Botswana is one of the best mining jurisdictions in Africa, along with Namibia. But there are some good jurisdictions, bad jurisdictions, and what you hope for in the bad jurisdictions is your again, it's cost benefit. Your reward needs to be extraordinary, and that's why Congo has mining despite having high political risk, because the riches of Congo are without many peers globally. It's an extraordinary country for metals, but people have been able to go in there, take the risk, spend all the time dealing with all the political and security issues, and actually building a mine, and it's worked out for them in the end. But so every country is tricky, and sometimes you'll get stable mining countries change overnight. For instance, in Australia, they occasionally like to throw massive taxes on their mining companies, which really hurts the mining industry. So that's even in a first world country like that. So it is tricky. You need to be very aware of political trends, and because it can be quite tricky for sure.
Got it. Take that to the corporate level. I mean, what do you look for in a company before you start sending them money?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. So let's say we're in a jurisdiction that I'm happy with. So I think it's a reasonable jurisdiction. Chance of getting expropriated is low. Chances for massive tax increases. I think locally, what you're looking for is you want a company that's operating in a jurisdiction that has ideally a mining culture. That really helps a lot. If you're going into countries where you don't have a mining culture, you get yourself into big troubles. I knew of a uranium company that had troubles in Spain trying to permit a uranium mine.
Yeah, you would think
that would be a tricky thing to do. I would never attempt it, but somebody tried and they failed. So no surprise there. So let's say you pick a good mining jurisdiction. Let's say Saskatchewan or Quebec as good mining jurisdictions. You want to make sure the local people are on your side. So you're dealing with the indigenous people. Make sure, like, it goes almost, as you know, federal government, state government, municipal government, but you also need to understand the traditional landowners or the First Nations, depending on the country you're in, and whether they're pro-development or they're anti-development, and to what level of sophistication they have. That plays a big role. Then within the company, I hear stories about people are saying, well, you need a strong management team and they'll get you a strong property. And that's generally true, but I've also seen real dopes find something really, really good, and then by total accident. And then hopefully, over time, those dopes get kind of replaced as people realize the significance of the discovery they've made. And so I've seen kind of both happen. I'm kind of open-minded to both. They both have their risks and their rewards, and I'm open to I'm open to all different things depending on the risk. Let me give you an example of the poster child for a project. I'm involved in a nickel project in Botswana. Well, there we go. Tick off the box, top. Botswana government, one of the top mining jurisdictions in the world, definitely one of the best, top 2 in Africa. Locally, well, there used to be a mine working there before, so all the local people know the benefits of mining. They possibly had relatives working at the mine. They're very supportive of a mine reopening. You go to the next level, infrastructure. Well, because there used to be a mines in the region, there's power, water. There's also mine buildings, shafts. So that, and then topography, it's actually flat. The climate's really nice. It's not like you're in the Arctic up in Nunavut or somewhere. Accessibility is there, and mining culture, and you're all set. And you've actually, in that instance, we're even so spoiled as to have a mining permit. So everything is pretty much done for us, and all we need to do now is build up the resource to a point where we could size the mine, right? So that's a Cinderella story, but I've been involved in some terrible situations in the Arctic where you're looking at an ice road and things like that, and it can be done. As you know, in northern Canada, in the Arctic, we've had 2 big diamond discoveries at the Diavik and Ekati mines, and they built those 2 massive mines in the middle of nowhere, only accessible by ice road in the wintertime, and aircraft, all year round. So there's fascinating things you could do with respect to mining if the riches are indeed there. And so I'm kind of pragmatic. I know what the ideal situation is, just like I mentioned about that nickel play, but if the rewards are there, you can move heaven and earth, as they did with the diamond mines in northern Canada, as an example. You can move heaven and earth to get things done.
Got it. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I'll just end with one last question. What's really one good piece of advice a mentor gave you in going into this business? It can be either evaluating a company or evaluating a country, or it could be analyzing risk reward, or the madness of crowds, whatever. What's one piece of advice that you just found that you just continually have leaned on?
Yeah. The person was not necessarily in the mining business. The mining business is possibly one of the toughest industries to invest in due to the high cyclical nature of it. But basically goes back to Warren Buffett. Basically, margin of safety, right? You want to make sure that if you're taking a risk, you need to know what the downside is versus the upside. Is it worth it? And if the stock's already run, I got an example recently of a $400 million company without a drill hole into their core deposit yet, but the speculators have already run it to 400 million. Well, I'm standing back because there's no margin of safety. In other instances, you're able to go out in the mining business and buy tremendous assets for pennies on the dollar that are worth so much money. So margin of safety is really an important factor, I think, in the mining business. That's probably the most important thing I've learned.
Excellent. Well, Warren, again, you've been very kind, and thank you so much for your time. I would love to do this to follow up again with you. Who knows when, but I would love that to do maybe in the new year with you, just to see where you're at. I think you had great advice and just really great insight. And you made the biggest impact onto me when I found out that you rode Bre-X up and then you shorted it down. I mean, must have taken a lot of courage. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful for your time.
Well, I'm very happy you asked me, Andy. Thank you so much. And listen, I relied on guys helping me out too. And I learned, if you read that article I wrote on Bre-X, it tells you a story of a crusty old mining guy who saved my ass from blowing myself up. So
I'll link it to it in the notes.
right. Well, thank you so much, Andy. Take care.
Hey, thank you. Bye.
Cheers.